This is Rough Drafts Welcome,
the podcast where you can mess up, and we can too.
I'm Sachiko.
And I'm Erin.
And together with the editors at Salt and Sage Books,
we're changing the face of storytelling, one rough draft at a time.
We're glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to Rough Drafts Welcome. This is Sachiko.
Hi, and I'm Erin.
And we are going to talk today about critique groups. So lead us into the fray, Erin.
Alrighty. So last episode, we talked about goals that you might be setting as you are entering this new year. And one of the goals that you might have is to find a critique group. So we thought it would be helpful to talk about what a critique group is, like the functions that they can serve, and then how you can go about finding one or creating one. So maybe let's just start with talking about our own experiences with critique groups.
Yes.
I have been in a variety of critique groups. I've been in some that are huge. I was in one at one point that had like 18 people in it. And then I've been in other ones. My current critique group is actually just me and one other person, just me and my critique partner. So I feel like I've had some experience across the wide array of them. And I've also had critique groups that were focused around like a certain thing. Like I've been in a NaNoWriMo focused critique group.
Right.
I've been in like contest focused critique groups where it was like we're all working together to enter this contest. So we're all exchanging our short stories or our first chapters or whatever it was that we were entering. So yeah, there can be a wide variety of critique groups. My personal experience is like the size differences and then the different foci?
Yeah, foci.
Yeah, how about you?
F-O-C-I-I. Yeah, so same here. The first time I ever joined a critique group, my dad found a short story writing contest when I was 14 and said, hey, let's both enter it. It was like sponsored by Media Play. If anybody of you remember Media Play. Wow, I feel old.
I remember Media Play.
Remember Media Play?
I do.
So we entered, we won. Each of our stories won. I gather maybe there weren't a lot of entrants, but my
dad,
come
on. Let's give you some credit. That's awesome.
It was actually, apparently it was pretty good. And they were very surprised at my story because they didn't realize I was 14.
I'm going to change the way I introduce you now. I'm going to be like, this is Sachiko, award-winning author since age 14. That's so cool. Who cares if it was from Media Play? That's awesome.
So what we
14,
won,
girl.
Yeah, and I think the wonderful thing about being 14 was that I had no expectations, which is a huge factor when it comes to a critique group and a writing career. What we won was an immediate membership to the Association of Mormon Letters, which has conferences, which we attended, and we were also awarded entry into an associated critique group, where local writers who also write sci-fi fantasy like us were gathering. So Dad and I, when I was 14, went to this meeting with a bunch of writers and everybody passed around their copies of their chapter and we made notes. And I remember asking questions and I was making notes. And looking back, I wonder how it felt for them to have a 14-year-old kid at the table asking them, and now that I think about it, Erin, I was even asking them world building questions. I was like, why don't you have the cat?
Of course you were.
Yeah, which that's a little different when the power dynamic is such that a 14-year-old is asking a 40-year-old why they have inconsistencies in their world building. That was, looking back, I was kind of an annoying punk.
No.
So
you just knew the questions. I don't know. I love that about you, that you've always just known, you've had such an eye for it.
I always have to, it's like I have to see something, get close, and then start poking it.
Yeah. It's a gift. I don't know. I don't have that gift. I don't have the world building gift. I'm glad you do.
But the thing that's really funny is, I love sharing that with my friends. I love asking the questions. But what I have found with critique groups in my adulthood and, more recently in our shared circles that we've met at writing conferences, that's not a great fit for every critique group. My approach is not a great fit. It's not what everybody's looking for. So what are people looking for in critique groups? Let's talk
Mm,
about the expectations and needs that we bring into critique groups. Why do we look
yes.
for a critique group?
Oh, they can be so, so, so varied. I think that everyone eventually gets to the point of wanting a critique group for one of two reasons. Either they are aware that they need external eyes on the project because they're too close to the project, or you hit the point in your writing career where you're like, I have learned what I can learn on my own, and I now need community to help lift me further. I think writing groups can be a really incredible way to get in touch with writers who have strengths that are different than yours and
Mm-hmm.
that will help you hone your writing skills in ways that you didn't know needed to be honed. Like I've had experiences in writing groups where someone says something and I'm like, whoa, like that just blew my mind. And they're over here like, oh, like I thought everybody understood that. And I've had the opposite thing happen where I've explained something that I'm like, oh, I'm like, this is to me, this is like such a basic skill. And then I've had another writer be like, you just like completely changed the direction that my story's going to go in. And I've been like, oh, I didn't know. So there's so much power in the community because we really don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think it's one of those two things. It's either an awareness of like, oh, I don't actually know how my audience is going to receive this, or it's a sense of I would really like to improve as an
I
author.
would I would add a third reason because you are a beautiful and selective introvert, and I am a loud and obnoxious extrovert. And writing is often solitary. And
True.
sometimes we just need to connect with people who get it.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is true. That's never been my motivation.
That's totally been mine,
But
which
that is, it
the
is a
critique
benefit
in
I've
other ways.
reaped from it though. It is absolutely a benefit because like as I think back to like my writing friends who I really jive with, so many of them I met through critique groups.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, very same.
So if you are
Mm.
out there and you're thinking, man, I'm not sure why this isn't working. I could use some informal collaborative editing, or I'm not sure what I need to work on next as a writer, or I am feeling really lonely in this. I need some motivation.
Hmm.
Yeah, a critique group could be a great approach for you. So let's talk about the different kinds of critique groups. I
Oh, there's so many.
Well, I mean, because you either gotta find one or you gotta make one. And either way, it's sort of like combining a beta reader with polyamory. Like you want to go and find an established group and try to fit in and see if you're a
Hmm.
good fit, or do you want to just take the leap and start putting together your own group?
Well, and I mean, just jump right off of that. There are so many extra things that get added when you have, I think, when you go from a partner to adding a third person to a critique group,
Oh
like the
yeah.
dynamic shifts immensely
Hmm.
because, I mean, there are just more people. There are more people, and there are more things to be aware of and more stuff to just be conscious about. Like, for example, when I was working one on one with a friend, like, I know her history and she knows my history because we're friends. We know each other. And then, but when I've worked with people who I don't know super well, sometimes I find myself giving feedback that I can see the other people in the group who like know this person well. They're like, don't do it, don't do it. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening here because you don't know all the backstory, you don't know everything. And it's not to say that you have to know people's backstories in order to be an effective critique partner, but that social aspect of it for me sometimes feels kind of overwhelming. That like people write what is so close to their hearts, and
And
to
we're
be
all
able
at
to
different
approach that in
places.
such a like a gentle way is can be
Right.
really hard sometimes.
Well, so I
Not
have
even
found
hard, but like you just don't know when you've stepped on something.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and okay, so here's my problem with critique groups as somebody who often bites off more that she can chew. Um, is and I'm extroverted, so it's easy to say yes to joining a group. It's harder to really understand what the group's expectations may be for commitment. So
Hmm.
I feel like I tend to be when I show up for critique groups, I'm not always bringing stuff for other people to critique. I am always willing to critique other people's stuff. Some critique groups may be grateful for that because, it's like free mutual editing. Other critique groups, that's like a relationship. And if one person is the only person disclosing vulnerable things and somebody else is only there as a judge or a critic,
Yeah.
that's not a great feeling for people. I don't want to do that.
That can get sticky so quickly.
So if you think, if you want to get real with yourself and figure, okay, I actually kind of need a critique group with low expectations where this is almost like a book club with wine. We're showing up because we all love this in common. We may not be doing this together the entire time, but we have it in common. So now we can socialize. There is nothing wrong with that. Network, baby. Like, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to make your own critique group, and honestly, actually, if you're going to join a critique group, that is one of the questions that I would absolutely either figure out for yourself or ask them. Like, how much commitment are you actually expecting? How regularly do you meet? What am I expected to bring as far as like my own work? But am I also expected to like read everyone else's pieces in advance and have critiqued it beforehand?
Right.
Or would you rather do like a live reading where you go around the table and do that? Do you want it to be like a 1 hour thing where it's like, I don't know, you meet every week for an hour? Or do you want it to be like we meet once a month and we spend 5 hours together? Or whatever it happens to be, there's so many different permutations that it can take. But I think understanding like, what am I expected to bring as far as my own work and as far as having done the critiques for other people? How long is this meeting going to be? Again, for an introvert, this feels like this is such an important question. I need to know how long you need me to be there.
Right.
And then like, what can I expect from the other people? Like if I submit work, is everyone going to come and be like, all right, I'm ready? So for me, it's super important to have somewhat of a structure.
Right.
And to say like in the beginning, we always do 10 minutes of housekeeping. And then we are going to focus on the writing there are 5 people here, so everyone is going to get a half an hour, and we all sent out chapters beforehand, and so everyone has something to say. Like that, for me, is like such a happy place because it's so organized, it's so clear. I know exactly what I need to do.
You can stop somebody from going over time.
Yes. Because we all agree together that that's how it's going to work. But again, I'm describing what works for me. What works for someone else might be completely different. You might really love like going and hanging out at a coffee shop for 4 hours with a group of friends who are all into writing.
So here's what I have seen that works for some people. So we both know some writers who enjoy going to more informal critique groups that, welcome all members. And basically they're going in there and there's a structure but the critiques that they're getting, it's mostly gentle encouragement. And that's why they're showing up. They're connecting. They're getting a little bit of direction with a lot of encouragement. Yes. You and I both know some writers where they have really tight-knit, closed groups. Everybody there's on the same page. Pardon the pun. And they're all working at the professional level. So they are really tearing each other's stuff apart. But it's because they are indie authors. They're traditional pub. And they're very intense about how they schedule their groups, showing up for groups, reading things in advance, working on things together. And that's a totally different level that, some people, I mean, if I were on a strict self-pub schedule, I would really rely on all of that help. Just the general developmental editing aspect of it, that would be fantastic. And I would love to help friends like that. If I'm just starting out, going someplace where, hey, writing is a normal thing. We're going to share this. Keep going. You don't have to get everything perfectly written right now. That is a great place, especially for people who are just starting out.
Yeah, it so depends what you need. When I was teaching my second year, I was lucky enough to teach a creative writing class. And, I loved it so much. It was, if I could go back, I would in a heartbeat. It was such a lovely class. But one of the things was that some of the kids really wanted to have like extra focus. Because part of the way that I did the class, and I did this very intentionally, was that you only got grades for completion in that class. Like if you did the assignment, you got 100 points. Like, good job, you've done it. So because I felt like it was unfair for me to say whether or not something was good or bad, because it's so subjective. I
Yeah.
was like, so like we would do, for example, like a haiku unit. And like I can tell you if the haiku was correct or not in the structure, but like I'm not going to tell you whether or not it's a good haiku because that's not helpful for anybody. It could be maybe I don't love it, but that doesn't mean someone else isn't going to love it. And then also goes into the idea that what is it, that art teacher story that goes around every once in a while as a meme where it's like the students, you know, the one I'm trying to say, the one I'm trying to describe. It's like basically the idea that quality or quantity ends up producing better quality than if you simply focus on quality. So just doing it a lot. Anyway, so because of that, I was not really giving my students feedback in such a way, unless they specifically asked for it. They had they could write if they put a little star on the top of their paper, I would actually read it and then give them feedback on it. But if they didn't want feedback, they didn't have to have feedback. That's fine. Sometimes I don't want feedback on my stuff either. So anyway, so I had some kids who were coming after school. We arranged it so it would be like it was genuinely so much fun. My point being that for those very brand new early beginning writers who were just finding their voice, who were just starting to be like, oh, I really like this, who were just barely realizing like, oh my gosh, poetry makes my heart go pitter patter. They did not need critique. What they needed was support.
Mm-hmm.
And those are very, very, very different things. And I don't think that it's bad one way or the other, but that you need to know for yourself, do I need critique on this or do I need support?
And it's okay to need support. It's okay. There's a lot of advice out there that's very rough and tough, and you got to have a thick skin and be able to take criticism. And at some point in your career, you can, but I have noticed that in general application, being able to take criticism well depends on having a skill set where you can see how to create something better. When you're starting out, or if you're in the middle and you're struggling to write, you love doing it, you know you're good at it, you've got a life that is making it like a battle every day to be able to find some time and energy to do it. You know, we've both done that as moms. It's okay to say, I don't have the emotional energy to handle harsh critique. I just need support. Good for you. You deserve it. Yep. Take it.
I mean, I've done this too, even in my critique groups that were more like craft focused and that were really intense. If I ever had a week where I was like, I just can't, or if I felt really tender about that particular chapter or something, I would just write them a note at the top of my paper. Because what we would do is we'd send it out a week in advance, and then we would all take the week to look at it. So I would tell them up front, be like, I cannot handle criticism of this particular chapter. If you can tell me what I did well, I would really love that. I know that the chapter isn't perfect, but I can only take nice feedback right now. And to be able to advocate for yourself, like critique groups are not for the boundaryless. If you don't have good boundaries about what you need, critique groups can be really, really difficult.
Yep. So it's supposed to be there to help. It isn't supposed to be there to hurt. Yeah. So how have we found some of our critique partners?
So many of mine have been through Facebook. And I feel like every time I mention Facebook, I feel like I have to caveat the like, yeah, I know that I'm a millennial. It's okay, guys. Like, I am aware. But Facebook has so many writing groups.
Okay, in defense of Facebook, it is the best platform for just lots of writing.
Yeah.
It's very writing heavy.
It is very writing heavy.
So,
and it's honestly a really good place to find to kind of like understand. Again, this is such an introvert thing, to be able to like observe people though and be like, are you my kind of person? I like things that you've said, like, and then you can be like, hey, do you maybe want to get to know each other a little bit better? Do you maybe want to, maybe we can trade some work? Ooh.
It's true. You want to stalk them, so you know if you want to like write or date them.
Yes,
that's fine.
Exactly.
Because you're going to be spending time in each other's brains and on each other's pages. You want to know this is somebody where you feel at least a fundamental kind of connection and a little bit of trust. It doesn't have to be, I've been in critique groups with people where I don't I may not be their best friend. We may not be best friends, but they're nice and I trust their sense of story in a lot of aspects.
That's huge.
If I don't trust their sense of story, their critiques aren't going to have as much value for me necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether or not they actually do have a lot of valuable things to say, I may not understand how much expertise they have. So
Yes.
that sense of connection is really important.
I agree. Yeah, I found a bunch of mine through Facebook. I found some of mine through writing conferences.
Oh yeah.
Where, especially in advance, like when I was talking about the first chapter writing group that I was in, that's actually how I found my current critique partner. Is that they asked in that group, like, does anyone want to be paired up with a critique group that's happening? And I was like, I would love that. Yes, please, thank you. And it was something like 10 people ended up in that group. Mm-hmm. And we all worked together for probably almost a year, actually, I think, before all of us were like, okay, it's too big. That's really what happened. Is it got to the point where we were like, we could only spend like 10 minutes on everybody's thing. And
how many people were in that group?
Like 8 to 10 people. And it was too many people.
I was going to say 8 to 10 is just about the limit for a critique group.
It was a little bit too big. And it was a little bit too big for the sort of feedback that all of us wanted. So we ended up, that group split off into several smaller critique groups, several of which I think are actually still going. Like, I know at least one of them is still going. But that was super helpful because it got us connected with people. And initially we were just helping with each other's first chapter contest stuff. Mm-hmm. But then from there, we were able to find people who, like, the feedback of one person in particular, I was like, I love her feedback. Like, she gets me. And so then she and I became friends, and then it transitioned really easily from, like, we were in the larger group together. We both really enjoyed each other's feedback, and then we split off into a smaller group. And that worked really well.
I feel like that's a natural progression, both socially and professionally, that you just sort of, you keep connecting with the people that, where it's really working. Most people that we know have one or two dedicated critique partners, and they may be writing in different genres, different levels of career, but you can find a person where you really have that great rapport and that history with them. That's awesome.
Do you feel like, is it important to have like a genre specific critique group?
I think, the more advanced your writing is, the more important it is that people at least have an understanding of genre expectations. So yes and no. For those who are looking for more of a social writing support, it's great to just have some encouraging voices and faces. Mm-hmm. But if you're really looking for help with deeper mechanics and trying to figure out what is working and what isn't, yeah, you need someone who understands the genre. What is very unhelpful is getting advice from somebody about what would work in a different genre that isn't applicable to your work.
Oh man, I've given that feedback before and felt really bad about it because I'm like, I don't know this genre very well, but what I think you could do is, and then afterwards they were like thanks for your feedback, but like maybe next time just say you don't have anything to add because it really wasn't helpful. They said it nicer than that, but like that was the vibe.
It's possible I'm wrong though. Well, okay, basically, let's say you can't find people who are matching everything, because it's hard to find, especially if you're living someplace where there aren't a lot of people, there aren't a lot of options. There are a lot of people out there who they need to look online for options. Okay, whatever. One way to approach it, because I've started this thought about 5 different times.
You're fine.
You can approach critique partners as market research for regular readers. So if you say you're like about mid-level, you're doing great, you've written some novels, you've got some work under your belt, you're looking at your options for publication, querying, indie pub, whatever. And all you can find is like the local critique group at your library, and it's got some wonderful, heartfelt newbies, and they don't know what you're talking about when you mention plot beats or genres, but they are trying so hard and they're there for you. Cool. Use them as market research. If they're probably there because they love to read. if there's something that isn't working for them as a reader, even if they're not familiar with your genre, that's still really important information that lots of people need.
That's a good point. It's
You
a
can
very,
take it
very good
as
point.
reader to writer versus writer to writer. It's
Mm-hmm.
still very valuable and it's very kind of people to share their time, even if they're just sharing it as an interested reader.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I do think it's important to not necessarily join a critique group where you dislike the genre. Like
Yeah.
if you actively dislike romance or if you are not a horror reader, then probably not a good fit for you to find a critique partner or a critique group that focuses primarily on those genres or on genres that have strong elements of that, like as a subgenre, might probably not a great fit at that point. But otherwise, I think you're spot on. Like that it's whatever I mean, you do get the market research.
And we are in a wonderful era when it comes to getting to meet virtually. So, if you have a very specific, you want to write romantasy, you can find people online now. So I want to go back to what you said about going to writing conferences. I have found that writing conferences is like going to the shopping mall for all things writing network related. It's such a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then vice versa. If you can find a local writing group and ask them which conferences they go and try one of the conferences that are more local with somebody from your critique group. It'll be a huge crowd or a smaller crowd, and you'll have somebody you can taste test it, see if it is a good fit for your own personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way to start meeting other people that you want to start putting together into your own personal Avengers team.
I agree. I agree. Um, so we've talked a little bit about what we need the group to do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit more about what you can give as far as critique. Like we've talked about it, we've touched on it a little bit, but I feel like it's important to talk about like, okay,
Oh
I'll just say
gosh.
the thing that I'm thinking. Okay, I really struggle as an author when I am drafting. I do not want anybody else to look at my draft. I don't. The way that I draft is so non-linear that like I will write a chapter and then 5 chapters later I come back and I'm changing stuff in that chapter. And then
Yeah.
like 15 chapters later I'm coming back and I'm adjusting stuff. Like I don't want someone to give me feedback on that chapter because I know I'm going to change it already. It's not in its done state. So for me, the revision process and the whole drafting process is such a nonlinear process that I cannot handle people giving me feedback about my stuff before it's done. And not that it's like done and it's magic and it's perfect, but like to where it's to the point where I'm like, okay, I do not need to change anything else. So when I show up in critique groups, I often don't have anything for them to read for months sometimes. And then I come back and I'm like, hey, I have an entire book. Can you please read this by next week? No. But like it can feel a little bit imbalanced sometimes because of the way that I really don't want feedback on my chapters as I'm drafting them, but I do want feedback when I'm done with that first draft.
Right. So what I'm hearing here, and I think this is really important, is that you know what your process is like. You have written enough novels now, and you have so many novels that you've written so many novels. She has it down to a science size, an Excel spreadsheet. It is amazing. She has metrics. Wow. You know what your process is, and you're able to tell people, listen, here's my process. Here's the point at which I will have something for you to work on, and this is what I need from you.
Yeah.
It's so important for us to be able to know ourselves and be able to tell people what we have to offer. For me, because I show up with me wanting to poke at things to see how they work, I have learned that if I want to keep everybody feeling friendly in a group, um, look, I love people, but I know that asking a lot of hard questions one after the other does not feel great sometimes.
Well,
even
and
though
you do it with so much love. Like I know exactly what you mean.
I'm so passionate about it, but some people are
because
not willing to answer it.
I've asked you for that feedback before, and like that's another thing that you need to know what you are, not only what you're able to give, but like what you are able to receive. Like
Right.
if you cannot handle that level of like deep questioning, then you either need to be really upfront with that, or you need to find other people who also don't want to do that sort of deep questioning. And that's not good or bad. You just need to know what helps you.
I have had friends who have been, I really need a deep dive on my world building. I need to figure out how the culture here works. Can we talk? And then I just boom, 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 boom. People may feel like they are in front of a firing squad if I'm doing that in the middle of a critique session where they showed up and they just wanted somebody to take some pretty paper mates and have them put hearts next to the parts that they liked in their 10 pages of chapter. Right. So it's incumbent upon me to ask, do you want me to ask world building questions? What kind of feedback can I give you? How can I be good to you?
Well, and it's important. I think you are right on about the point, but I think it goes in two different ways. That like you need to know what you need, and you also need to know what you can give, and they have to come into a really nice mesh. Let's talk a little bit about how to gracefully leave a critique group,
because
you're
guys,
finding that it's just not working for you anymore.
And
there can probably go through some. That's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to love every party that you have tried. Like you can walk in and realize that one guy in the critique group who always has the axe to grind, or the lady who never, there's so many ways a character can start throwing a critique group off and ways to, so when you have to leave a critique group, when it's time to go, depending on the level of formality in the critique group and how many people there are, there should be a proportional level of communication about leaving. Like if there's 12 people, you're all showing up because there was a bulletin, like an index card on the bulletin board at the library. You can just post everybody. Most likely, it's okay.
That's okay.
You don't need to ask permission to leave. But if you have made a commitment into a group where everybody is setting aside time in their busy lives to show up to a Zoom meeting every week, or like 5 hours one Saturday a month, you got to tell people that you're bowing out. I think that would be the kindest and clearest thing to do. The hard part for me, reasons why you may not want to, is if you realize that a critique group is either emotionally or socially not working, and it's uncomfortable to have to acknowledge that to everybody, because a lot of us are not taught. We don't have the tools to do that gracefully. I get you.
I was going to say, I don't know that I have the tools to do that gracefully necessarily.
It's hard not to turn it. A critique group is like, it can be both professional level and also a really volatile social slumber party. Like we give so much of ourselves to people and to our writing and to our hopes and dreams and to our fear of rejection. Emotions can run high in a critique group. And it's hard also, I find that it's hard for me to get real with myself about the limitations of my schedule. I want to be a writer. It's hard for me to get real about times in my life when it can't happen.
You just don't have time. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the energy. So when you're brave, step one, get real with yourself. Why? If it's not working, okay, it's not working. Now what? Step two, communicate. Like write it down. If you need to tell everybody in writing, it's a writer's group. They'll read.
They will read. For my critique, my chapter submission for this week is actually my resignation letter.
Yes.
No critique needed.
and three, and I think I think all of us think it goes without saying, but all of the applications may not occur to us until we've already had a lot of social interactions with a lot of people over the course of many years that I am seeing. Don't pee in the sandbox. Don't pee in the sandbox. Those people in your critique group, you're probably going to be running into them locally at conferences, professionally. They're going to know people that you're networking with. Don't burn a bridge if you can.
The writing community really is small.
It is small.
And I think people don't necessarily realize how small it is until they're kind of bitten by how small it is.
Yeah.
Bitten or blessed. It's one of the two. You either
Yeah.
know someone who knows someone, or you know someone who knows someone. And that can go either direction. But yeah,
I almost wish
be so polite. Be so polite.
because it's hard if you've already ticked off some major players. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole thing. I think it's hard to even find instructions on what to do after that. You know what to do after you've had public meltdowns or feuds with people or coming back from times of and okay, here's why this is applicable to everybody. When the Me Too thing happened in Kidlit,
Oh yeah.
um, anytime a big
Oh yeah.
or Romance Writers of America, anytime something big like that comes up and it's controversial, and you find people on either side of a big long line, it's I mean, there are social consequences, and you can feel it in critique groups. You can feel it in the where you can continue to network and where it's not comfortable or not a great fit for you anymore.
Yep.
And that is how life is. You don't have to be everybody's friend, but it's a good time to start practicing how to be professionally friendly. And this is almost impossible for me. Not always totally personal.
It's
And
hard to do. I
oh
mean,
my
we've talked about this, that writing is that weird combination of having a really, really thin skin so that you can write about the human experience and write about it well, and a really, really thick skin. So it is that same interplay that's really difficult. It's a hard line to walk.
yes. Yes. So be kind to people, go to conferences, ask around, get to know people so you can get to know people and try things out. It's
Yeah,
okay to
be
make
brave. Go to events, try a chapter. I mean, if you're wanting a critique partner actively, a critique group, you can literally just find one of the groups on Facebook and just literally post, be like, hey, I have a book that is this genre. I'm really looking for someone else who is this genre too, who can really I don't know, really help me level up my writing, or who can really give me a lot of support and encouragement, or hey, I'm a newer writer. I need some accountability. I need someone who wants to do sprints with me. I mean, there are groups on Facebook and threads on Twitter where people go that they just sprint. That is the whole thing that they do. And you can make friends that way. So it's being open to other people, which is scary. But it really is just about trying things and figuring out what works best for you and what doesn't work best.
Yeah.
What you need and what you can give.
If you try 5 critique groups and it's all a bust, it doesn't mean you're a failure at it. It just means time to keep
Maybe you
looking.
need to make your own.
Yep, make your own.
Yeah. Yep. Really quickly before we sign off, because we are just about at time, I wanted to point out too that it is very common practice within a critique group, especially if you're trying to enter a critique group that is already established. It is very, very common practice for them to invite you for a test run, or for you to invite someone else for a test run. So if you're just looking for a critique partner, those test runs usually look like you exchanging some chapters so they can get a feel for your level, your style of critique, and so that you can get a feel for their style of critique. And also you can see if your writing matches, right? Like if you're interested in reading what they write and if they're interested in reading what you write. And it is deeply, deeply, deeply okay to say you're desperate for a critique group and you find one and they're like, we really like you. We would love to extend an official invitation, but you didn't really enjoy being there. It is okay for you to say thank you so much, but it's actually not a good fit for me at this time. That's fine. You don't have to elaborate. You can just say not a good fit. You don't have to tell them, I actually really hate the way that you write. Blah, 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 blah. I hate second person. I can't believe it. Don't do that. I mean, it's okay for you to just be it's probably not a good fit. And that's a little harder to do one-on-one when someone's like, wow, I love your writing. Do you want to work together? And for you to be like, no, actually, kind of, I don't. But you can do it in a way that is polite and that still honors their process and that is still kind. You don't have to be unkind about it. And it's okay for you to say no. You do not have to stay in critique groups. It's not a good fit for you.
If it's not a perfect thing, but you're really yearning for something, get in there. Get in there and just try it. See if this is just, even if you were like, you know what, I don't really care about their criticism. I just like that I have to produce something once a week and I'm finally writing on a schedule. Cool. Use it for that. That works.
And that comes back to knowing what it is that you need out of it. If the accountability is like the thing, then it doesn't really matter if you jive with everybody else in the thing or not. Like, you can do it just for the accountability part. And there are also groups that just want to do accountability. Like, that's fine too. So, yes.
Yep. If you can think it, it's probably on Facebook. Take a look.
Genuinely, though, it probably is. It probably is. And you can always, if you ever are like, I want to try something out in person, talk to your librarians. Like, go to your local library, call them up, tell them what you're thinking. They probably either know who to connect you with, or they can help you set up an event for the people that are local in your area.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like local. At my library, we have writing workshops. We invite authors to come in and, just stuff like that. Yeah. Or a local community college. That's also a really great place.
Oh, yes. That is a good place. Good
the genesis of many groups. Or if you have like an indie bookstore locally.
Mm-hmm. Or a coffee shops. Yeah, coffee shops are often a really good place. Even... Oh, what's it called? I just lost it.
It's like a watering hole. It's like you go to it and you just see writers in the wild.
I know, and you just got to go and like bump into one and be like, "Hey, I'm a writer too. Ha ha. You want to be friends? Ha ha." It's fine.
We need to write an app that instead of Grinder, it's Writer. It's ding as you get close, and you're like, "I've got a latte too."
You want to sit together and write?
You're my type.
Oh my gosh.
You look like you'd be a font of wisdom. So that's all we need to do. We just need to create an app.
You know what? I would download that app. I would.
Me
Absolutely.
too.
Oh, that's too funny. Okay. Is there anything else that you feel like we ought to talk about with writing groups?
Nope.
Okay.
Just get in there, get messy. It's a lot of human experience. And if it's a bad human experience, you're going to have more grist for the mill. So much more to write about. It'll be funny later.
It's true. And if it isn't funny, you can always take it to therapy.
Get your money's worth.
This is the mood. Alrighty. Okay, well, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. This has been Rough Drafts Welcome.
Thank you so much for listening.
Got any questions? We would love to hear them. Got a complaint? We'll hear it too.
Yep. Leave us a 5-star review. Pretty please, and thank you. And if you want to book with Salt and Sage Books or learn anything else about what we do, or if you want to work with us or take our courses or blah, 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 you can find us at www.saltandsagebooks.com, and we're all over social media too.
We sure are.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.